Alright, so the purpose of this video is to hopefully shed some light on some of the questions that you might have when it comes time to install shocks on your vehicle. I had a lot of questions that simply weren't answered by YouTube videos, so I wanted to share that with you, and hopefully you won't have to go through all the legwork that I had to. What we're looking at here, starting from the bottom, is the original shock from my vehicle, and I should tell you that my vehicle is a 2006 BMW 325 Xi. Okay, so that bottom one is the bad shock. The one up from that is the Bilstein B4 equivalent of that. And then the two above it are the Bilstein B6s. The B6 is the same height. The B8, is my understanding, is the same shock, just a little bit shorter for those of you that have sport suspensions. As far as sport suspensions are concerned, it seems like there's some debate as to whether or not it matters if they were aftermarket springs or not. In my book, I'm thinking if it's a shorter spring, it shouldn't matter if it's aftermarket or not. So I went with the B6s because I do not have a sport suspension. All right, so my question when I started doing this was, why are we putting on a different dust guard and bump stop than what was supplied with the new B6 shock? Because if you've watched the videos online, and there's probably one in particular that shows this, it's the only video I could find that shows this shock with that car. And they're showing the shock setup at the top there, and that appears to be incorrect, at least for my car. Now I don't know why that is. Maybe in that video, I haven't checked the date, but maybe that video is an old video, and maybe the part isn't the same, or maybe things have changed since then. But that individual is a mechanic. I am not a mechanic. I'm just an auto body guy. So when I put these two together, you can see some differences. So I'll zoom in a little bit here. And actually, I'll give you the part numbers for these, just so that we're clear. The B4 shock is a 19-135021, and the B6 is a 24-120395. And you'll notice that the pictures on the box don't exactly match the shocks themselves. I guess that doesn't matter so long as you get the right product. Might have been just a generic picture. In any case, here is the shock as it appears to me in the instructional video on YouTube, where they replaced the dust shield that came with it with an OEM part. When I set it up this way, you can see there's a small gap at the top. That's not supposed to be there. I've been told that with that gap, you'll get a lot of clunking sound. So if that's what's happening, that's what's happening. So this, according to a diagram, is the correct way to do it. What my concern was is that this top cap piece for the bump stop doesn't seat around the edge. So my concern was dirt, debris, ice, you name it, getting up in there. After talking to Bilstein, they assured me that that is fine because it does have internal wipers. It keeps it clean. And just to illustrate the point, you can see from this part that it's not very wide at the top, but it is flat and it will be flush on the inside here. So there shouldn't be any reason to think that there would be stuff getting in between there. I'm going to go ahead and take this apart so that you can kind of see it a little bit better. And this is the top bushing. This is the lower top bushing. And there's two pieces here, a rubber boot and the bushing itself. And then this is the bump stop with the cap piece, which pops off. So this cap piece is what we're looking at here. And you can see, well, when you could see it when I took it apart, it's supposed to be snug around this edge where it seats. That's not the case here. You can kind of see a little bit of a gap. But again, they assured me that's fine. So, just to finish illustrating the point, you can see that's basically how they go together. And it's flat, and like I said, there shouldn't be any reason to believe that there's going to be anything going in there. If you're really insisting on doing it the way I had it here, what you'll have to do is remove this. This originally is on there. And you can also see there's a internal bump stop. So it kind of makes sense that you don't want to add a second bump stop. Not to mention the gap at the top that we discussed. Alright, so according to Bilstein, and for the record, Bilstein did recommend that all of us refer to the BMW service manual for any technical data, and you know, that's what they said. So, you know, they're giving us their best guess. But at the end of the day, it's the service manual that counts. Looking online, the service manual costs money, and we're all on a budget here. We'd rather spend money on nice parts than service manuals if we can handle the job. At some point, it might be beneficial to buy a service manual if you have an older car. Moving on, I wanted to show you the diagram that Bilstein provides, and it illustrates that you have the upper and the lower upper bushings with the cap, and you can see with this dotted line, they're intending for it to be like that. Not the way I have seen in a video. Now again, the guy in the video that we probably have all seen by now is a mechanic. I'm sure he knows what he's doing, and I'm gonna maybe assume that that is just a different shock, and maybe that's why it fits better that way. One of the questions that I had was torque specs, being that I, you know, broke this off. Hopefully you don't do that. That cost me about 60 bucks right there. And that's at the point where I upgraded to the B6 shock. I figured, what the hell. So, torque specs. You can find torque specs online. In fact, this diagram is the second page of a 2-page PDF that is online that you can find at bilsteinus.com. And if you go to the top of the page, on the left is a parts catalog. You click on that, you type in the part number, and it will give you this diagram. The first sheet has the torque specs in both Newton meters and foot-pounds, but I actually wrote them down just for reference. And for the record, the torque specs that are on there are only for Bilstein shocks, not for other parts of the car. So I wanted to zoom in here. Again, you have bilsteinus.com online catalog, top left, and this is for the Bilstein rear shocks torque specs. Now they base this on the diameter of the stem. They refer to it as like an 8M, but basically that means 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, and so on. And if you look, you can see you don't want to torque it down to the max torque. You want to go about 5 foot-pounds under the max torque, and then literally drive around the block and top it off. You can see I have written at the bottom, they're referring to that as wind-up torque or torsional torque. Basically what that means is if you over crank it down, this rubber bushing, or I guess it's rubber, foam or something, it can twist. As you're tightening this nut down, the thing can twist, and this can be twisted inside. And so you want to make it a little bit under the final torque so that the car can resettle and be in its proper shape. And then at that point, with the weight on the car still, give it the final torque. So in this case, I have a 10 millimeter. So you can see I need to set it to 19 foot-pounds and then start at about somewhere around 12 to 14 foot-pounds of torque. And if you're wondering how do you determine that, I have it on good authority that the way you figure that out is you can simply take a socket. In this case, it's a 10 millimeter socket. Slide it over the end. I already did this before, so I know that this is a 10 millimeter shaft, which means I'm looking at 19 foot-pounds. And it's the same for the bottom, and it looks like it's the same between the two different shocks. Final note, I suppose, I have this and I don't use it that much. It seems to kind of just be simply a supplemental guide, not necessarily a bad thing to have, but rarely does it have all the answers for me, least of all torque specs. So I hope this was helpful. Leave a comment, share, and I may be posting another video. These shocks are really stiff, and so I have to figure out how to compress them to get them into my car. So maybe I'll do a video on that.